Mark Cavendish is going to do it! Oh, he's done it! He's done it!
I can't say it without sounding like cocky, but you know when you're good. That's how you turn pro. You know you have something. That's why you pursue something, isn't it? You know, you can always dream of stuff. But so young, I was already world champion in 2005, and I was winning pro races even before I was pro. You know, so I kind of just, you don't know, but you can have an idea that you can do all right. You know.
Did you think that all right would be, well, 2 years later, well, the next year, you won 2 stages at Giro, 4 at your first Tour de France.
I was in my second Tour de France. I rode the Tour de France in 2007 as well, when I was neo-pro.
Oh, did you?
But I was out of my depth.
Oh.
But it gave me the knowledge of how good I needed to be to the Tour, of actually how much bigger than the sport the Tour de France is.
This is kind of nice, actually, because with that first tour then, saying you were out of your depth, was that when you fell in love with it? You loved
I guess so. It was different then. It started in London in 2007, and T-Mobile was big in the UK, you know, and it kind of made sense on both levels, both from a commercial side, and I was winning World Tour races, you know, so Pro Tour at the time. So it kind of made sense. It was a kind of win-win. There was a sprint stage into Canterbury. Okay, I could win. If not, I know for the next year, you know, and that's kind of how I saw it. And
what was that like for your first tour?
It was it's crazy because you think you know cycling, and I explained to everybody who's never been in the Tour de France, you got cycling, and you know you have amateurs that think they know pros, that they watch it, but they can't have an idea of what it's like to ride as a pro. Like it's another level. And you've got from pro to world tour is another step up. We haven't just got a step up to the Tour de France. It's above the sport. It's like you've got the 170 best bike riders in the world. None of them are really doing their first Grand Tour. None of them are really coming back from injury. None of them are using a Grand Tour to prepare. Like, it's the consequences of winning and losing of that race are so much greater than anything. So you have the 170 best, all at the peak of their fitness for that year, all with not just cycling world's eyes looking at them, but the world's eyes looking at them. It's pretty nuts, you know. Not even just in the racing, everything around it is just bigger. It's just moves. It's just the highs, the lows are just more. It's so special.
You were good all year round, pretty much. You started the season winning, but the tour, you always went into another gear somehow. What was it, do you think, was it motivation? What was it that brought you that extra gear at the Tour de France?
First and foremost, there's a difference between being a sprinter and being a Grand Tour sprinter. Like, people have this idea that if you put the most power out, you're the best sprinter. You know, there's guys that just put out wedges of power. But sprinting anyway in cycling, it's not about sprinting. It's about sprinting when you're in the red and you've been in the red for a while, you know? And that's when you see, that's why I don't have a high peak power, but I'm able to I don't lose as much. I'm quite efficient in the bunch. So people with these massive peaks, like, it's actually irrelevant when you come to the end of a sprint in a lot of races. And the Tour de France, like I said, as everything, is elevated, you know. Okay, you got a sprint, but you got to get there. And of course, there's like a image that I'm always dropped, and I'm not. I'm just the first one with a camera on them that's dropped, because I've done what I've done in the Tour de France, you know. And it helps that I've done it a lot of times, that I know how it goes. Obviously, cycling has changed a lot recently anyway, and it's just it's hard in general, you know. It's just a grind, you know. Like, you can no longer really extreme specialize. You had really small, skinny climbers at one end of the spectrum. You had, to put it nice, fat sprinters at the other end, you know, pure sprinters. And cycling's quite cool in that they race together in the same sport. Obviously, you go for different stages and that. But you had guys in the middle, say, for the best example now, you have Wout van Aert, who's in the middle. He can do everything, do you know? But at the end of the day, he's just a massive engine, you know? And then you got a high explosive power, and you got a climber. And kind of, as cycling goes now, those extremes have really narrowed. So everyone's a lot more like that, just engine, you know? You do have extremes of that spectrum, but the spectrum's really narrowed, if that makes sense. And I've obviously had to adapt because I was a complete extreme, you know, and fortunately, experience is a nice word for age, you know. Of course you get older, but you also get more experience. You learn to adapt, and I've been able to do that as best I can, I guess. So.
After the Tour de France, 34 stages as far, going with all the other races along with that, so you've got all your wins. It doesn't matter for me, knowing you what you like, it doesn't matter if it's a race in Belgium, a random race in Belgium, it doesn't matter if it's a race in England, the Tour of Britain, it doesn't matter what it is. You are literally the hungriest man in cycling and still the same as you were back then. What is it? For a lot of people, for your success of what they've had, they'd have said, brilliant, right, that's it, I'm done. But you're still here, you're still going. You've had a lot of ups and downs the last couple of years.
You've answered the question in your question.
Don't tell me that.
Like, I've never really, not just me, and I think I'm guilty of being the one that's put it to like everybody else. Nobody kind of looks at what I have done. Do you know what I mean? Because I've never kind of looked at what I've done. I've always set a target, try to do it, and then set another target, you know? And of course it set me up to kind of be in this position that I can't really appreciate 161 wins, you know? Because I have to keep winning. Every year you have to get better. It's not just in cycling, it's in every sport, it's in life, you know?
But why do you have to do that? What is it that makes you say, I have to do that?
You just do. You can't rest. So one thing I instill into my kids is, you know, like, you don't rest on what you've done. You continue to strive forward. Like, I'll support my kids in whatever they do, you know? Like, whatever, the only thing I ask is commitment to improve, and don't give up. Don't give up, I think, is the most important thing.
Mark Cavendish is going to do it! Oh, he's done it! He's done it!
Do you like LeBron James, basketball, Federer, tennis, Usain Bolt, athletic? They all transcend their own sports. Do you realise that what you've done, you transcend cycling? Your name is brought cycling massively up. When they think of cycling, they think of Mark Cavendish. Do you think that? Do you know that?
Not really. I think the greatest joy I get is, like, if I feel like someone, like, people do say, like, I can't deny that people say, oh, I got into cycling because of you, you know? And that's the proudest thing I get from my career, you know? My kids get inspired by other sports people. Like, they get inspired by cyclists. Like, they watch the World Cup, and yeah, my boy has got like Messi kit now, you know, and that's what sport's about, isn't it? And people dream to be like them, you know. Like you, I remember you said, do you remember when we were out riding when we were young, and you'll be someone, I'll be someone, and you're racing like that.
Yeah.
It's what you want, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know.
Of course,
and I see my own kids doing it, and you actually realise what it's about.
Doing it with you, Casper, especially Casper.
Yeah, and it makes me really proud, you know, like, yeah, it's special. It really is, you know. But it's actually more special that I'm still just dad, you know. That means more than anything, doesn't it? You're just a dad, whatever you do.
Yeah.
But seeing them and how they look up to other sports people and other cyclists, and like Casper's obsessed with Wout van Aert. He loves Julian Alaphilippe, you know. He loves Tadej. And he knows about them, he spots them in the peloton, and you know that other kids are doing that. Not just kids, adults are doing that. And you realise what it is you do, you know. I think it's irrelevant how you've done it, if you win races or you pull wheelies, or it doesn't matter. I prefer the winning races side. But, yeah, it gives the essence of what we do with sports people. At the end of the day, we're all getting on a bicycle and trying to be first across the finish line. It's don't really make sense when you think about it. But if other people can dream to go and cross that finish line first, you know, and
you're a lot of people's heroes, I think, and I don't think you quite. I think you accept it, but you don't quite know it. You're very humble with it.
I don't know. That's nice for you to say. Thank you. Am I your hero?
No, God no, definitely not. But you are one of the older men in the peloton now. I think you realise that, but I also think I had Formolo in here earlier, and he's still like a kid, and you're like a kid when you're on your bike. You're laughing, you're joking when you're in the peloton a lot. Going with what you're like on the bike, there's like a switch that flicks with you, and it's at like 40, 50k to go when you're serious. You try and come up to you, try and talk to you, you have none of it. You just concentrated in that zone. Knowing what you're like before that point with your younger teammates now, what are you like with them and trying to give them that experience that you have? Because there's not really anyone in the peloton anymore that's got...
Well, it depends where we're at, because like some last years, like doesn't matter what team I go to at a race, I was expected to win. And sometimes, you know, I think with any job, like you have the equipment to win, but you'd rather have the best equipment to do everything, you know? And it's irrelevant to personalities and stuff like that. Our job's to try and win, and you have to figure out how to do it, but ultimately if the book comes down to you, like there's a pressure on that, you know? And actually me coming to Astana, like you know me, I'm not going, I don't just want a job, you know? If things aren't right, it's not gonna happen. And Astana is the perfect opportunity to win in sprints. It's something the team hasn't done before, but my God, they got the capacity to do it, you know? And it's really exciting. And actually we can just go in and people probably scoff at it, you know? And you know how it is, there's journalists who like to use my name to just get a story, you know? And they'll write about it, blah, 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 blah. And ultimately, if that's one thing, but it's coming from kind of, you're supposed to do that. There's a pressure on there that it's not nice. But for instance, we sprinted here, and I tell you, I finished 21st, you know? I could have rectified the situation, but still not won the race, I guess. But I felt like the sprint we did here in Oman is like, it felt like a victory afterwards, you know? Like a group of guys, like some of the lads I haven't met before here, you know? We haven't trained together.
How did you talk to them before the lead out, before the finish, before even the race started? Did you go through things with them?
Yeah, and actually the fortunate side is that they're very quick learners actually. The ones that did spend time with the training camp, very quick learners, which is super nice. And I don't profess to get everything. I don't know everything, you know. And but at the end of the day, like I think it helps with, you know, there's a lot of sprinters that they see themselves, or not just sprinters, but leaders. They see themselves as a leader, and everyone has to work for them, and that's how. And I've never seen a sprint like that. Like it'll be talked about in like people don't really know cycling, that you have a train, and you don't need a train, but a train definitely gives the biggest benefit to try and win the sprint. So, but the sprinter is just the last part of that system, do you know? And he or she has to get it as right as everyone else, but every single piece of that sequence has a knock-on effect. If they do it right or wrong, it has a knock-on effect of not just the person after them, but everyone after that. And yeah, it just knowing that you put this group together, okay, what's the most efficient way for us to cross the finish line first? You do it like that. It might work, it might not.
Do you think knowing your presence and doing what you're doing and trying to teach them and help them learn is not just helping them help you, but helping them?
It's not about helping me. Like I love it. Like I had guys when I was younger, like teach me things, you know, even superstitious things. My first roommate was Axel Merckx, and he said, like, you don't put your numbers on the day before a race. It's always the day. I've always done that ever since. That's a superstitious thing. And then, I don't know, tips on training, tips on recovery, you know, tips on where to be in the peloton. Like we've talked about it, like racing at home, doing chain gangs and that. You learn how to kind of look after yourself, but the fundamentals of how an echelon works, if you're not in the right place to learn that straight away, you don't know.
Yeah.
You know? And yeah, I was fortunate to be with guys like Roger Hammond when I was young that taught me that. And I love it. You know, it's like, as a dad, like, you know, it's proud when you teach something and you see it implemented, you know? It's the same with my teammates. Like the young lads come in, you talk about it, okay? And when you see it implemented, it's like, yeah, you really get a buzz off it, you know?
That's good. Right, I'm going to read you off a little stat here. Do you know how many tour stages you've ridden? No. 184 tour stages, 34 wins, 18.5% win rate, best ever. But the days that you haven't won, and you being you, what's that like in Mark Cavendish's head after?
When I was younger, it was just anger anyway. If I didn't win a sprint, it was just anger, just emotion. As you get older, you learn that the stuff is out of your control, and there's, you know, and if I make a mistake, then sure, I'll be angry. If someone better, if I was beaten, you learn to deal with that. If you had a problem that it's not, you couldn't have it in your control, you have to let it go, you know. And it's helped me as I get older, for sure.